A little over a year ago, my friend Bob had a oak tree come down on his property, and he gave me a piece of the log to turn into some bowl blanks. So this is one of them. It's pretty rough looking now, but we'll go ahead and clean it up on the lathe. It does have some cracks in it that we'll need to deal with. It's been on the shelf for about a year, so it's nice and dry. The first thing to do is get on the lathe and true up this tenon so we can get it into the 4-jaw chuck. So should be a good project, so let's go ahead and get started. Here's the bowl blank, getting ready to put it on the lathe. When I roughed it out, it was January of 2015, and this bowl weighed in at 2945 grams. A month later, I just checked it to see what was going on, and it was down to 26 grams. In July of 2015, it was down to 1860, and when I checked it about a month ago, or a little less a month ago, on January 16, it was down to 1888. So it's lost about 35% of its weight over the year. So it's staying pretty close, within 20 grams or so of when I weighed it previously to now. So it's pretty much reached equilibrium and is ready to be turned. What we're going to do is, I got the 4-jaw chuck on the lathe. We're just going to put it up against that, bring up the tailstock, and put it in the hole from the previous rough when we roughed it out. So we're just going to go ahead and tighten that up and get that nice and tight on the lathe. Let me move the banjo out of the way. So we got that. Let's tighten everything up, make sure it's all tight, and then we'll turn it on and see how it does, but we'll stand off to the side just in case something doesn't go the way it's supposed to. I got the lathe turned down as low as it'll go, which is about a little under 600 RPM. So let's see what happens. Okay, so we're ready to go ahead now and true up this tenon so that we can get it into the chuck. Going to use a 1/2-inch bowl gouge to clean up this tenon. It's just a matter of making a few pull cuts to flatten the tenon off, and then use some push cuts to make it round again. I bought a new chuck, and this particular brand takes a dovetail tenon. So I'm just using a skew to put a little dovetail on the tenon before I put it into the chuck. Well, now that the bowl's being firmly held in the chuck, I'll just use the bowl gouge to make a few passes and make it round and get it to the shape that I want. It's time to work on the rim of this bowl. I'll just take the bowl gouge and make a few light passes to flatten it and get everything true. Before I fill any of the cracks that are in the upper portion of this bowl, I want to remove some of the interior and get it turned down a little closer to the final dimensions. So that's what we're doing here with the still using the bowl gouge on this particular part of the bowl. I'd run some oak boards through the drum sander, and I took some of the dust out of the dust collector and mixed it with some 5-minute epoxy, and I'm just using a putty knife to force it down to the crack. I just keep pushing on it and pushing it through the crack until it comes out the other side. So I used the same process on them to fill all the cracks. It was actually a pretty good color match too, so it actually worked out all right. Well, I let the epoxy sit up for quite a while. I know it's only 5-minute epoxy, but I like to give it an hour or so to dry and harden up. So I'm just going back to the bowl gouge and turning the outer rim down to it was just a little over 3/8 was the final wall thickness of this particular piece. I didn't show it here, but I kept using my calipers to check the wall thickness, making sure that I was getting a consistent thickness. And I also used my homemade depth gauge to keep checking the depth of the bowl to make sure I wasn't turning it too thin on the bottom. I switched to a carbide cutter to finish up the bottom part of this bowl. The bowl gouge would have worked fine, but I find that for me personally it's a little easier to use this carbide cutter in this particular area of the project. One of my favorite tools for a finishing cut on bowls is a negative rake scraper, which is what I'm using here, just a little finishing on the inside. And I also used it on the outside to clean up that epoxy that was we used to fill the cracks there. So it does a good job cleaning it up and getting rid of any tear out and getting the piece ready for sanding. I don't know anybody that likes to watch people sand, but I just wanted to put it in to show that I did do it. I started with 80 and I sanded the inside and outside up to 320. It's time to remove the tenons, so I got the bowl in my large jaws. You'll notice I got some blue tape on there. That's probably not helping much. It's probably to make me feel better more than it is going to hold the bowl on there. I did have one come off one time, which is, I have a short video on that, so it's always a surprise when that happens. But this was held pretty good in this large chuck, but I said the tape makes me feel a little bit better. Before I remove the tailstock all the way, I'm going to use the round nose scraper to finish up the bottom of this bowl here. I'm going to put I guess you'd call it a reverse curve in it. It's going to come down and then curve in and then out and come into a foot there. It doesn't really show up that well on this particular piece of the video, but I wanted the bottom to be the foot to be smaller than it was actually coming out, so this worked out pretty good. I removed the tailstock and I'm going to go ahead and remove that nub that's left on there. I'm going to try and keep pushing in towards the headstock so that I don't put any undue pressure on it. It's held pretty securely in these jaws, but no sense in taking any chances. Well, I want to hollow out the inside of the foot there. I'm using a parting tool to set the depth and then a square nose scraper just to remove most of the material. I'll leave a little rim there at the bowl will actually set on. And just to jazz it up a little bit, we'll take the point of the skew and make a couple little circles on the bottom there. Here's our oak bowl all finished up. Once I finished turning on the bottom, I went ahead and sanded it up to 320 like the rest of the bowl. It's got some pretty nice green and stuff in it. I think it's a nice looking bowl. Our repairs are pretty much almost unnoticeable from the outside, but you can see them a little on the inside, but that's all right. It was an effective repair for that crack that was in it. I really see this being a utility bowl, maybe to set on a counter with some apples or oranges or something like that in it. So I think it'll be great for that purpose, and it's a good size for that as well. It does need some finish on it, so the finish regimen for this piece is to put on a couple coats of seal coat, which is de-wax shellac, And then to follow that up with a couple of coats of this high performance, which is a water-based top coat. I like using the water-based top coats this time of year. Allows me to finish the project inside the house and not have that obnoxious smell from the solvent-based top coats. So once I get the finish put on it, I'll take a couple of pictures and put them at the end of this video. So it was a fun project. I like turning bowls. They're a lot of fun. So I hope you enjoyed watching as much as I enjoyed making this piece. Thanks again for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe.